Question number 12. Will you copyright the map? Will the map infringe on an existing copyright? All right, so the first thing I want to say about copyright is, oh my goodness, credit all your sources. Maps are like any other authored work. If you referenced any other sources, data sources, design sources, images, graphs, text, anything, if it wasn't your work, you need to credit it to whom the credit is due. So credit all of your sources. Things to know about copyright: maps, charts, and globes are all protected under copyright law. Copyright protection applies only to the expression of facts, however, not the facts themselves, okay? So what we need to figure out is, what is that line between original and creative work? Because when it comes to maps, there's the boundaries of the states in the US, the locations of cities, locations of rivers. These are just facts, but a map particularly expresses them in a certain way. And it's the creativity of that design that we are trying to protect in large part. So that line between what is considered original work and creative work from unoriginal, non-creative work can be rather difficult to define. A map cannot be under copyright of the creator until that map maker puts in an appreciable amount of creative work into the product. And like I said, that line is hard to define, okay? If you are just presenting facts, the boundaries of states, the locations of cities, black and white, standard font, that's not very creative. That type of work isn't necessarily going to be copyrighted. However, if you want to present them in a different way, in particular, selections of color, type, other interesting data and comparisons that you're making with other variables, then it starts to become a creative work. It becomes something that you can't really find or see in anything else. And in that case, it should be protected under copyright. But here's an interesting fact about copyright. I've put it in bold, I've put it in orange. I also explicitly stated it under the learning objectives. There does not need to be a label saying that a work is under copyright for copyright law to apply. Now, once you've done a lot of work on a map and you've created something very original and creative, beautiful, what have you, you don't necessarily have to have that copyright symbol for it to be protected by copyright. A lot of people like to include that to remind other people that it is protected under copyright law, but it doesn't even necessarily have to be there. I think there's a lot of confusion when it comes to when you get to stick that copyright symbol onto your work. I think that some people think it takes submitting it and getting an approved sort of process, but that's not the case. This is applicable to any creative work. So that's why you're going to see photographers, for example, put in a little watermark, copyright, Avery Field Photography, right? And they put their little slogan at the bottom to say, this is my creative photographic work. Not the people in it, but the way that I presented them and captured them. Same thing with a map, right? It's not about the facts and what you're showing, it's about how you're showing it, right? So it's nice when you include a copyright to remind others. That's really just a courtesy and a little bit of extra layer of protection for you as the author of that map. But even if you forget, you should not find someone else using your work and claiming it as your own. That would be a violation of copyright law. All right, so original work is assumed to be the copyright of the creator, with all rights to reproduce or publish reserved to the creator of that work. People should not be using your creative work without your permission, without attributing it to you. So keep that in mind. Keep that in mind. A lot of people forget that also applies to photography and other creative things that you post, say, on social media. But people really shouldn't necessarily just be sharing it. It would be better if there's something that you want to share that you ask if it's something that the person who made that image is willing for you to share. So issues of copyright are very much connected to licensing. Public licensing agreements are very useful to cartographers and anybody else creating creative works. And these are licenses that transfer. They go ahead and transfer some or all rights to the general public. If you already know that your work, your creative work that is protected by copyright is something that you want to be able to share and for others to be able to share, then it's good to identify a license type under which your work can be shared. All right, so very helpful in this task is understanding Creative Commons license types. So I have a video that you're going to be able to watch about Creative Commons and their license types, but I do want to identify the 4 main terms that you might see in these various Creative Commons license types, because there are 6 license types that are a combination of 4 possible terms. Number 1, and included in all of them, is attribution. You should always receive attribution when your work is shared by someone else. So if I made a map that I want to share with others and they share it with others on my behalf, they need to attribute the creation of that creative work to me, Emily Castellucci. All right, so that's what attribution means. We also have the option of no derivative works. This means that others can only copy, distribute, display, or perform verbatim copies of your work. If you don't want anybody messing with it or tweaking it or adapting it, but you want it to be exactly the same, you can specify no derivative works. Like if you don't want it to become, for lack of a better word, corrupted and not what you originally intended it to be, and so as to protect your name on that work, no derivative works could be a very good option. Then there's the share alike options. Others can distribute your work only under a license identical to the one you have chosen for your work. So if you have chosen attribution, no derivative works, let's see, if you have chosen attribution and share alike, it means that others have to share your work under attribution and share alike, okay, that particular license type. And then the last option is non-commercial. Others can copy, distribute, display, perform, or remix your work, but not for commercial purposes. So that's a very useful option when you don't want others to take your work, make it better, and then they get profit off of your original idea. So that's a great way of protecting the idea, but also making sure that it gets out there. All right. So what we see on the left are the various combinations that are supported in Creative Commons licenses. Notice that common to all of them is attribution. This means that others can copy, distribute, display, perform, and remix your work if they credit your name as requested by you. Okay. So that is going to appear in all license types. Sometimes you're going to see attribution and share alike, attribution and non-commercial, attribution and no derivative works. And then we have a couple of license types that are combinations of 3 out of 4. Attribution, non-commercial, share alike, attribution, non-commercial, no derivative works.